Inside another historic room at Edinburgh Castle, Jo Rowling sat down to discuss her personal story and how writing the last chapters of the Potter saga closed an incredible chapter in her life.
Ending this series for you, is it a relief, or is there a sense of mourning, or maybe a combination of the two?
Definitely both. A whole bundle of emotions wrapped up into one. Immediately after finishing writing, I was very hard to live. The first 2 days were terrible. Terrible.
In what way? Tell me what you did.
I was incredibly low. What is probably hard for people to imagine is how wrapped up this 17 years' work is with what was going on in my life at the time.
Her often told life story sounds almost as magical as the books she conjured up. But what's not as well known is the magic was tempered by sorrow and loss, which played a key role in the creation of the Harry Potter books. In a foreshadowing of events in her own life, her parents met and got engaged on a train traveling through the English countryside. And Joanne Rowling was born in a village in the west of England 42 years ago this week. Her father Peter was a factory manager, her mother Anne a lab technician. As a little girl, Jo amused herself and her little sister Di with early attempts at hair-raising stories.
I wrote this little book about a rabbit called Rabbit and his adventures, and I illustrated it myself too, and showed it to my mother, who, as mothers do, was rhapsodized and said how wonderful it was. And what's interesting to me is I was 6 years old, and I thought, well, are we going to get it published? I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
Fast forward 20 years to 1990, and Jo Rowling came up with a very different type of story. She had been visiting a boyfriend in Manchester, England, and was traveling back to London on a train when inspiration struck.
Absolutely true, yeah. I was on the train from Manchester to London, and it came, just came.
Had something like that ever happened to you before?
Yes, truthfully. I mean, other ideas had just come to me, because I think if you're a writer, and that's what you spend a huge amount of time doing, ideas do come to you. But nothing had ever come so, with such a, I had this, I thought, God, I'd love to write that. And when I got off the train, I went straight home and I started writing.
Then living in London, she kept her story about a boy wizard to herself. Her mother was gravely ill, and then died 6 months after her daughter began writing the Potter story.
Did your mom ever know that you were writing this?
No. That's one of my biggest regrets. She never knew. I never told her.
She had been sick for quite a while. She had battled MS for 10 years.
Yeah.
How did her departure, her death, affect this book?
Definitely Mum dying had a profound influence on the books, because
in the first draft, his parents were disposed of really in quite a almost cavalier fashion. I didn't really dwell on it. 6 months in, my mother dies, and I simply can't kill a fictional mother that callously. I'm not saying it wasn't callous, but it wasn't what it became. And I really think from that moment on, death became a central, if not the central theme of the 7 books. You mean death in terms of loss, not just the killing of people, but...
Yeah, the theme of how we react to death, how much we fear it, of course, which is a key part of the books, because Voldemort is someone who will do anything not to die. He's terrified of death. And in many ways, all of my characters are defined by their attitude to death and the possibility of death.
The loss of her mother affected Jo Rowling in another way. It was time to move away, to say goodbye to the British Isles.
You decided to leave, get rid of the old boyfriend, move to Portugal. In that time, married, have a baby.
I have a baby, Jessica.
Divorce, and you come back.
Yeah.
To a kind of a different world. You're
really
on public
different.
assistance at that point?
Yeah, that was obviously a very, very tough time, because I'd been working always up until that point.
She wrote about Harry at an Edinburgh cafe, with baby Jessica napping by her side. She lived in a small upstairs apartment. Then, after a publisher saw the first 3 chapters of the book and asked to see more, she rushed to finish it.
I was determined to try. I was determined to try, because frankly my life was such a mess at this point. What was the worst that could happen? Everyone turned me down, big deal.
But the tough times were about to end. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the UK title, was eventually bought by small British publisher Bloomsbury for $4,000. About a year later, in 1997, her agent called to say American publisher Scholastic was bidding for Harry Potter.
He phoned me and said, there's an auction going on in New York, and again, I'm so clueless. I thought, why is he telling me about that? And, he had to be quite specific, an auction for your book. Why would I be telling you about a furniture sale?
You could be so dense, Jo.
Well, I always, to be honest, life had battered me around so much in the previous few years that when you start receiving good news, you're quite mistrustful.
It wasn't good news. It was pretty great news. They'd never offered that kind of money for a children's book, over $100,000.
Unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I started to think, we can buy a house. Now, it was all security for me.
Since then, her financial success has become legendary. Forbes estimated her fortune at more than $1 billion. But publishing 7 long books in such a short time took a toll.
I had said I could produce a novel a year, but the novels were getting longer, and there came Goblet nearly killed me to get it out for the time when they wanted to publish, and that was my fault.
But now her life is a lot less stressful and a lot less lonely. After 9 years as a single mom, by 2001, she had a new man in her life, her husband, Neil Murray.
Which I never in a million years expected. I never dreamt that I would marry again, and I really didn't. I was in a place where I thought, well, I have to be and I was genuinely very grateful. I was sometimes lonely. I hadn't met anyone that I wanted to be with long term. So I just thought, well, this is my life. I'm not meant to have that. And then, of course, the moment I'd accepted that, I met Neil.
The couple has a son and daughter together. Oh, and by the way, when Jo and Neil got engaged, another train figured in the story, not the Hogwarts Express.
My husband proposed to me on a train.
You probably thought, oh, this is so romantic.
Well, I did. It was the Orient Express. I'd always wanted to go on the Orient Express.
Now she's devoting her time to her family and her favorite causes, such as helping single mothers and finding a cure for multiple sclerosis, the disease that took her mother's life. And now she has a chance to reflect.
Finishing has certainly made me look back a lot. And it is almost incredible to me at times what's happened. And there's certainly moments when I imagine that I've dreamt it all.
Coming up, when Harry met Hollywood and turned 3 Potter fans into stars.
She has a great understanding that the films are one thing and that the books are another.